Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for, hi, Charlotte. Hi, everyone, for coming to our meeting tonight. Congress Park Neighbors is an RNO that has been formed for over 40 years. It's an all-volunteer board and organization. All our projects and our paper and our website and newspaper delivery, all of these are organized and managed by your volunteer board. Our job is to represent the neighborhood to the city and bring you information about projects that the city is managing or suggesting, and allow us an opportunity to take information back to the city in an effort to solve problems and inform people. Our meeting is going to be recorded. I'm going to ask you to hold off on questions. The chat's going to be off during the presentations. We have 2 presentations tonight. And then afterwards, we will have a question period that will be plenty of time. And if not, you can write a question and we will make sure it gets to the proper person. We're going to have Scott Gilmore here with Parks and Rec. And I'm going to remind everyone that we are not going to discuss pickleball and the status of pickleball at Congress Park tonight. It's a big issue. The board is aware of it. If you have questions, they can get directed to Scott, but there is a separate forum for the pickleball discussion. So tonight we are not going to have a discussion about it. Scott is going to present about the upcoming construction project that's in process right now. And then afterwards, we'll have a presentation and discussion about the upcoming BRT project. So Scott, thank you for coming and joining us tonight. Please go ahead. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed meeting with you and just talking to you about issues in Congress Park. I am Scott Gilmore. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Denver Parks and Recreation. I've been in this role approximately a little over 11 years. Been enjoying a lot of it and really enjoy trying to do the best job I can to provide high quality parks for all the residents and people that visit the city and county of Denver. The projects that we have going on, I'll just cover the projects as quickly as possible, and then I'll be around on the call. If people have questions, I am more than willing to talk here, or if this goes over, I am always available. Victoria has my email address. She can provide my email address to everybody. You can email me and I will do my best to get back to you, and I will discuss any issues related to parks or even the city if I can provide information. So in Congress Park, we have multiple projects going on, or we've finished some multiple projects. One of the main projects that we just have completed was the Congress Park pool reconstruction, which we are, we got it done finally last year. We didn't totally finish it with the painting and everything, but we've gotten all that stuff done, and the pool would be opening back up for this summer. We're really excited about that. That pool was leaking a large amount of water. And it was important that we really got that project done and improve that whole facility because it is the nicest outdoor pool facility we have in the city and county of Denver. Beautiful, beautiful pool. That project was a little bit over $10 million. And that we're excited about that. Actually, with the pool, a big challenge with getting our pools open and keeping them open has been lifeguards. I was just informed yesterday that the lifeguard hiring is way ahead of last year, which is exciting for us. So that means all of our pools, instead of like last year, us having to cull some of the indoor pools to open the outdoor pools. I don't believe we will have to do that this year. So that's a very exciting thing that we are able to employ lifeguards and get our facilities open, all of our facilities open. So that has been a pretty exciting thing to happen. So the next project is that I will cover is, I'll just go ahead and talk about the court replacement real quick. That is actually, and I'll just inform everybody here now, we've been moving forward with trying to figure out the court replacement. I have to own that a lot of the tennis courts fell into pretty serious disrepair in the park. The upper courts, the 5 upper courts, all fell into pretty serious disrepair, and actually really impacted the park's ability to actually provide programming. Congress Park is actually one of our most programmed youth activity areas, between the pool and the tennis courts. That our staff, our recreation staff, really utilizes this park as really a hub for youth sports, especially tennis and swimming. That has really kind of fallen off because of the construction project, because the pool pool was down. And then also the tennis courts had just been in horrible shape. And we're really excited that we're moving forward with the replacement project. I know Victoria mentioned that we're not going to discuss the pickleball, but I do need to mention, I will just talk a little bit about what happened and why we're at where we're at, and try to keep it brief. Because the upper tennis courts were in such poor condition, we, like any other parks department in the country, if you look at YouTube or look up pickleball, our parks departments across the country are really trying hard to address the pickleball craze and the need for pickleball courts. So Congress Park was one of those areas where we had a court that was on the edge of the park that was our youth court and wasn't being used very much. And so what we did was, we really poor condition. That is the court that was converted into pickleball. Lo and behold, we didn't know what we didn't know. And we've learned a lot in the process. Pickleball is definitely taken off, and we're going to try to do our best to address the need for the pickleball community, to provide them some high quality spaces for them to play pickleball and not create conflicts within parks. So what we've done is we have moved forward with the court replacement, which is going to consist of, and you guys will actually be seeing here pretty soonly, if you're near the park or you're walking by the park, we are right now in the process of abatement of those courts. A lot of the tennis courts and just a lot of the stuff that was built in the past, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, was built with asbestos. So those courts have asbestos in them. And so that is what we are dealing with right now. We are abating those courts. We have just found out, to be honest, today, because of regulations to Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Department of Public Health and Environment in Denver, we have been we're being required to actually totally tint those. I believe we're going to totally tint those courts now. So you'll see tents going up around those courts to just make sure that we're containing everything and disposing of it properly within the regulations that are required. And we just want to make sure that we're keeping the community safe. So we're going to move forward with that abatement and really start working on those courts and getting that process done. And then we will move forward with rebuilding those series of courts. There will be 5 tennis courts and a basketball court placed back into the park. And then when those are completed, we will, our recreation department is incredibly excited about restarting their youth programming in those areas. and I'm just going to say this for I let Victoria know this, and I have worked incredibly hard. I don't want anyone who plays pickleball or really loves the game to realize that Denver Parks and Recreation is not in the business of, we don't want pickleball in our parks. We do want pickleball in our parks. It's an amazing sport. People love to play it, and we want people to get out in the parks and play it. It just has to be in the right location. And so we have actually, because of the importance, we feel that how important this is, we have identified $2 million within our budget to actually look at some locations, which we believe we already have a few locations selected, to actually build pickleball facilities that are dedicated to pickleball and will not cause conflicts with other park users. Congress Park isn't a large park. And between the brand new pool being redone, the playground being rebuilt, and then the other improvements that are happening in the park, you've got athletic fields, you've got our maintenance shop. There's a lot going on in that small space. You have the Botanic Gardens across the street. It's really kind of almost like a neighborhood park, and to have the sheer amount of pickleball players wanting to play pickleball, sometimes it's not the best situation to have that many people descending on a neighborhood park to play this sport. So like I said, you guys are the first group that I've informed that we have we are going to try to address as quickly as possible the need for pickleball in the city. And like I said, we have identified $2 million within our budget, and we've placed it in a pickleball fund. And we are going to move forward with building some pickleball courts in the right locations that will not cause conflict in our parks. So that said, I did want to cover that and just kind of, touch base. And if somebody wants to speak to me on that, you can reach out to me at my email. It's scott.gilmore@denvergov.org. I'm always willing to talk to anybody about these issues. The next project is basically so the court replacement is moving forward. Just so you guys know too, we are really working on these projects to make sure that they're complete. Construction costs are out the roof. If you go on our website and look at these, we have like project descriptions. Right now, our project description for the court replacement it says $2.6 million for the court replacements. That cost has jumped to $3.5 million. And we found the money to do that because we want to make sure that this park is getting high quality amenities. But we are scrambling to just make sure that we're going to make these projects whole. The next project is and you guys are probably starting to see what's happening on this one. It's the playground and walk improvements. This project is actually improving, is going to redo the playground. We're really excited about that. And then also we're going to redo the walks in the park to really address the ADA issues that the walks in the park are just not compliant. You can, if you are in a wheelchair or you have issues trying to move around a space, this park does not help that. So we are really working hard on addressing all those ADA issues. We are also working with Dottie, and I got some more information today, Victoria. They are actually providing some additional money to actually do the sidewalk along 8th Avenue. So we will be placing a sidewalk along 8th Avenue to allow people to move through Congress Park because there's no sidewalk on 8th. So that we will be adding a sidewalk there too. But that between the playground and all the ADA and just walk improvements in the park, that project now it says that it was $2.2 million. That project is now $3 million. So like I said, we are doing our best to try to scramble and try to pull all these pieces together. I truly apologize. I mean, Congress Park, it seems like it's just been an ongoing construction site. But because of the way construction is right now, we're doing the best we can to get these projects done and as quickly as possible. But it is very challenging. And these are not small projects. These are major improvement projects that are millions of dollars. If you add these up, you're talking, $16.5 million of improvements over the last, just between these three projects. So that's kind of where we're at now. And we're going to be moving forward as quickly as possible and trying to get these projects done. And just so you guys know, Parks and Recreation, we do manage these projects, and we're in charge, but because of the large scope of these projects, technically the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure leads the projects, and we are just kind of really trying to help manage the project. So it's a coordination in the city that is pretty significant. And on the courts, with the abatement issue and with the environmental concerns, DDPHE and CDPHE, the state and the city organizations, environmental regulation organizations, we're working hand in hand with them to make sure that we're doing everything correctly there too. So this is not just building a simple park. This is doing a major amount of improvements, and trying to do them right. So that's my update. Thank you, Victoria, for having me.
Scott, couple of questions. We didn't talk about this today, but there are no special event permits in the park this summer. The only structure that can be permitted is the shelter house. And I'm assuming the permits are temporarily being suspended because of the playground.
The construction, yes.
Okay.
But I think we had emailed the permitting office and included you, and I'm not sure if you reached out to the permitting office, but we know that your community gatherings and the events that you have every year are very special, and we want to make sure we honor that, and we will make sure that we can maybe do a workaround. And if you didn't reach out to permitting on this issue, why don't you email me again? And what we'll do is we'll make sure that we're being as supportive as possible. And if we can support you having I think you have an ice cream social or something in the park, let's make that happen. And whatever we need to do to support that, let's do it.
That'd be great. And we have a question about when the playground would be completed. I know the courts are an 18-month project that just began.
So right now, construction is going to start this fall, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the construction of the playground and the walks will be completed by summer of 2024. So hopefully, to be honest, by the time 2024 rolls, so I know it's almost a year, 2 years, to be honest, away. Hopefully all of these projects are done and completed, and we're out of your hair, and you guys can just enjoy the new facelift on Congress Park.
Thank you. I am going to let people ask questions now. We just wanted Scott to have an opportunity to present. Someone has already asked. If you raise your hand, I'll pick you. Hold on just a moment. Someone's had. Will the sidewalk on 8th Avenue be curb adjacent or between the row of trees?
I think
that's a challenge.
Our standard, I believe, I don't know the specifics, but our standard is to try to make sure that there is a tree lawn per se. And so there's a safety issue. We don't want people walking around along 8th Avenue directly adjacent to the traffic. So we do our best to make sure that the sidewalks are placed within the park and to ensure the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists that are moving through that area. I can get some more specifics on that. I contacted the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and they said that they were actually transferring money to our budget to complete this sidewalk. So we're working hand in hand with them on this, but I can get more specifics on that one.
Thank you. Miles, you were next, and then Sarah, you were right behind him. Miles, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for presenting here to the neighborhood. I've got some questions more about the policy of how you manage these changes. I was involved with Vicki in the playground, and there was some talk about walks. But I guess you're going to put a lot of money into these improvements, but I guess my question is, so how do you get public engagement into these changes that you're doing? Because we brought up the safety concerns about the corners and kids crossing to the pool from the west. So why is it your department doesn't come and meet with us about what you're proposing to doing with the sidewalks, where you're putting ramps? Because, you know, again, we were involved with the East Central Area Plan, and they're supposedly putting a bike route through there. So there's just a lot of things happening. So can you just tell me why you don't, even with the pool, there was very little community input as to what was going to happen, what you were proposing. Can you tell me why your department doesn't engage more with the communities in which the parks are being redeveloped?
Well, I mean, I actually sent Victoria a whole list of the public engagement that we do. We do try our best we can to engage with the public. I think as a department, we do a pretty good job. I know that we miss people, and because of COVID, there definitely has been some, some missteps or just, organizations or groups that we just maybe not have contacted good enough or worked with well enough. But I think, some of the things that we also have to deal with there are certain requirements within, ADA and sidewalks. And so sometimes we're trying to do the best we can to accomplish what the community wants, but also do what is required by law for certain things. So some of the things that we're doing, I don't know the specifics, Miles. You can email me. I can try to get you some more detailed information, but I'm not the project manager. I had to pull the cut sheets today to actually see the project and what's going on. And that information is very high level too. So I don't have a lot of the specifics that you're actually speaking to. So I would need to reach back out to my team to try to get you some more information.
Well, I guess it's an observation, because I was trying to get a hold of your department during the pool redesign. And I did talk to a project manager from the Parks Department, and she basically said, I can't be your go-to person. That we don't do that in this department. And basically we had no one to talk about. So in regards to the sidewalks, you're going to be installing them. You have the plans. That makes sense. You're looking at ADA, you're looking at legal issues. I guess my point is, send us the plan. What are you planning on doing? This is city money. I would just suggest in the future, when you're doing things, just have a meeting with the RNO. We can post this stuff about what you're planning on putting millions of dollars into, because we live in the neighborhood and we might have some suggestions that might be helpful. That's all. So,
that's fine. Like I said, if you want to email me and you want some additional specifics, that's fine. I think we try to do the best we can to work with the specific RNOs in each neighborhood. Just understand that we have 250 projects going on in the city. Parks, we have a lot of projects going on. We have about 250 projects. We don't have a, mighty, massive marketing and communications team. So we're trying to do the best we can to reach out to the RNOs, provide them information on the projects that are happening. I get emails about, different outreach efforts that we're doing, meetings that we're having, different events. There's a lot going on. So sometimes we do miss things, and I apologize about that. But if you want some specifics about some projects, we can possibly do that. To send out all the plans for a specific project, though, that's a pretty significant effort, because plans aren't just, something simple on a project. We have very detailed plans, and
I might suggest
Miles,
sending out the cover sheet that just shows where the improvements are and what's being planned, not detailed.
And that's fine. I will reach out to my planning team and see if we can, once a project is to a point, we can send, we do have all the projects that we do. We have a cut sheet. This is kind of our cut sheet, and it has the project information, how much it is, what's going to be happening. Maybe we can include a very basic plan of what the project is laid out as.
Thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for all the great work Parks is doing for our neighborhood. We're excited to see the pool come back again this summer, which will be wonderful. My question is about the kind of coordination between Dottie and Parks related to the 9th Avenue, the planned 9th Avenue neighborhood bikeway, which as a cyclist and a mom who cycles with kids, I'm really looking forward to that as an east-west connection through the city. But right now there's a big gap right in the middle of Congress Park. And I know sometimes it's contentious to think about bikes coming through the park when there's potential pedestrian conflicts. But I would really just encourage Parks to think about that connection as you're doing the court resurfacing project. I've mentioned this to the Parks board, or I guess it's the advisory board. So I've brought it up with them. I've brought it up with Dottie, and really haven't heard a great response. So I know you're not going to have a response tonight. I don't expect that, but I really just would love some thought there, because thinking ahead to this network of cycling infrastructure, this would be an unfortunate gap that potentially we could fix as part of this project within the budget. So
could you do me a favor? You've got my email address, right? Did you have please email me and I will connect up with the Dottie, my counterparts in Dottie, and I will get you an answer about how we can. And it is, I will admit, it is a real challenge between Dottie and the bike infrastructure that they're doing, because they have a specific goal, and they have their mission and their goals. And then as Parks, we have our mission and goals, and sometimes they don't jive. And me and Victoria were talking about this today.
Right.
They see a park and they see immediately that this is where they want to run the
Sure.
bike path through. And I get that, but sometimes their designs directly impact the use of the park for everybody. So it is very, very challenging sometimes, and it takes a little more effort on all of our parts to work together. But we are a city, and we should be working together to find solutions for these issues, not just having these big gaps that could be fixed when we're moving through these projects. So I appreciate it if you just email me, and I'll work on it tomorrow and get you an answer.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Let me jump in for a minute. Scott and I did talk about it, and I have requested that he will. He has a specific contact at Dottie about the bikeway, Sarah.
I've been emailing back and forth with Riley Lemmy and various folks and
so
Chris Schooler.
Do me a favor, Sarah, if you can, real quick. When you email me your last communications with them about this issue,
sure, yep, I can copy.
Just forward that to me.
Okay.
Which really helps me know who you've been working with, because if I need to move up the chain a little bit, I can.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Charlotte, go ahead.
Right. Hi. And thank you, Scott, for being here. I just would like to request that we have input prior to such things as the walkway design being an accomplished fact. Because as users, those of us in Congress Park kind of know where we'd like to walk and where we do walk and where it works and where it doesn't work. And I guess I'm not sure who sits down and decides where you're going to put the walks. I understand they to be ADA compliant and so forth, but there are a lot of users, and so how is that designed? And if it's already been designed, can we at least see the design and maybe have some feedback, preferably before they start pouring the concrete? Thank you.
Yeah, Charlotte, just real quick. Yeah, I mean, the people that do the designs are the park planners. They're the ones that went to college for this. They're the ones that have been doing this work for decades. They know this work. I know that we can look at things, and I know we just redid walks in my park across the street from my house. And, I have suggestions and things. I kind of have to go with a lot of the things that they are moving forward with because, and there was some public, I have to admit that there was some public meetings for this, but because of COVID, a lot of these, and I'm not trying to give you an excuse, because of COVID, we had some public meetings and then it kind of was a gap between the public meetings and now we're really moving forward. And then also just the pool construction. All this stuff was actually supposed to be originally done at once. The pool, the playground, and the walks were all supposed to be done together. Because of the complications with construction and just having enough people to do that work, we pulled the pool out separately because we needed to get that done and try to get it done as quickly as possible. Now we've moved to the playground and the walks. I will do my best to get you a schematic of the walks and where they're at. And I know a big part of that was actually moving people through the park safely from the existing parking area to the court area and those stairs, which doesn't allow people to actually access the courts, people that might be in a wheelchair or such, to be able to access those courts effectively. So just those are some of the things that are going to happen. I don't think it's going to be these massive changes of walkways and, anything different. It's just that when you do walks and you're really trying to address the grade issues and trying to make sure that they're compliant, it takes an awful lot. And so I think that the paths are really going to follow where they historically have been, but they're just going to be compliant, ADA compliant. So.
Thank you. Dina, go ahead.
Hi, Scott. I apologize
No.
if you already talked about this, but this has to do with pathways and it might tie into what Sarah is asking about continuing 9th Avenue through the park. But is there any discussion about actually having a sidewalk that runs up Josephine from 8th Avenue towards the Botanic Gardens where there's no sidewalk on either side?
I'm not sure about that one. It's probably been considered. We do work very closely with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure on these sidewalks. And so, I don't have the specifics on that one. And so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to have that there. You guys, most of you have been, around our city long enough to know that our parks definitely were not designed with people walking on sidewalks in mind. So we are trying to scramble and to, get sidewalks into parks where we can. But it's also really, really challenging. I think the gentleman earlier brought up, is it going to be between the trees or the street, or we're having a real challenge because the trees historically, 100 years ago, 70 years ago, were planted in specific locations, and we're trying to avoid taking out these older trees that are a big part of our urban canopy. And it is really, really challenging to do that. So the last thing we want to do is be cutting down, a 100-year-old tree. And, we were working with Dottie just recently, and we put in a curb cut on 6th Avenue and a sidewalk there. And we lost a 100-year-old tree because there was nowhere else to go. And so it's just really, really challenging. So that's why these projects, it's not as easy as, people think that you can just put a sidewalk in anywhere. The trees have very extensive roots that go out incredibly far. And, per our regulations, you cannot just go in and cut the roots of a tree because it might be okay for a year or two, but because of the damage that you've done that you don't see above ground, that could definitely kill a very, significant tree in our city. So pretty challenging things, but on 9th Avenue, I'll definitely get some more additional information and I'll show it with Victoria, or if you want to email me, I can try to get the information directly to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Scott. I think one thing I had trouble finding this as well is initially there were 2 plans for the court revision, a half court, a full court seating. Could you send the final plan of what you guys have decided on up there? I realize it'll lack some detail, but maybe just start with some information and we can go.
Yeah, like I said, the project sheet that I have actually
Has
needs
that.
to be updated because the dollars are already off, and it was just updated a couple weeks ago, and we realized that the price of that project has increased, you know, by $900,000. And so I will get that updated and send you that. It has a schematic of what we're going to do.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you
No.
for visiting with me today around the issues in the park. And we'll be in touch. And everyone, as Scott said, you can email him directly. You can email me and I can try and help you sort it out. Specific pickleball committees are meeting. I'm not trying to gloss over it or walk away from it. It's just a big issue.
Yeah, and like I said, if anyone has any questions, you can definitely reach out to me. And I want you to know, yes, Parks and Recreation, we're trying to do the best we can. We trying to address a growing sport. We're doing the best we can, and we've made some mistakes. We just have, and so we're trying to, I take responsibilities for those, but I'm also trying to make sure that we are addressing the growth of the sport and doing the best we can to provide high quality spaces for pickleballers to play. Plus also improving Congress Park for all the residents that live around Congress Park. My goal is to provide the highest quality parks in every part of this city. And so I take a lot of pride in that. And so if anybody has any questions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me directly. And like I said, I want Congress Park neighbors to know that we care about your community, and the decision making that we make, and I'm a big part of that decision making, is I'm trying to look at the quality of life for the whole community. And I have to make some pretty hard decisions that sometimes doesn't make everybody happy. But that's part of the role that I serve in this city. And I do take that very seriously. So that's why being on this call, I take this very incredibly important that I'm reaching out to this community to let you guys know that I care. And my goal is to provide you a high quality park in your neighborhood you guys can visit to and just, visit with each other and enjoy.
Thank you for coming, Scott. We have our next speaker tonight is Dennis Royer. Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dennis Royer. He's going to give a presentation about the bus rapid transit program. Dennis, thank you for coming, and please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege, I think, to speak to any neighborhood organization. In case some of you don't know who I am, and so I don't come across as an irate citizen yelling and screaming about bus rapid transit, let me give you a little bit of my background. My last government job was the Chief of Public Works and Transportation, Public Works Commissioner for the City of Boston under Mayor Thomas Menino. Prior to that, I spent 7 years as Deputy Manager of Public Works in the City and County of Denver, where I was responsible for the coordination with all the outside agencies, DRCOG, CDOT, and RTD. Prior to that, I was the Denver City Traffic Engineer for 15 years, which put me in control of not only the public right-of-way, but again, dealing with RTD on a regular basis. Prior to that, I worked for 2 national consulting firms in Washington, D.C. before coming to Denver, where I worked on a number of transit projects, in particular the Washington, D.C. subway system, which I hope some of you had a chance to ride, because it's a wonderful system if you haven't seen it. And I actually have my name on the design of 2 stations in Alexandria, Virginia. And I've worked on other things. I may be one of the few living people in the City and County of Denver who actually was on the design team and worked with the construction of the 16th Street Mall. So I've had some exposure in terms of what's been going on. I've also, until I left for Boston, was coordinating all the light rail for public works with RTD. So I want to just point out to you all the background experience I have, so it doesn't seem like I'm just somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay. The reason I wrote the update, and you may have read it, may have not, or whatever, is that we cannot get information, and you just ran into that listening to Scott, with the fact that this administration has informed their employees not to deal with neighborhoods. Okay, we are considered whiners and complainers, so they try to avoid and minimize as much interaction as they can get away with. Okay, I have been fighting this BRT proposal since their first draft report came out in 2016. And I've asked the same questions over and over again. Where's the traffic study? What's the diversion onto 13th, 14th, 17th, 18th? How is triple preemption going to work on Colfax, and which signals are going to be preempted, since you can't possibly preempt all of them? It'd be an absolute disaster from an operational standpoint for what would go on the arterial streets. And again, some of you may have attended last night's meeting. And once again, all of these questions were raised. And again, no answer from the city. In fact, the ridiculous answer we were given was they've submitted to FTA, which is the Federal Transit Administration, and are waiting for their comments before they can go public with the neighborhood organizations and the citizens. Okay. Having only 28 years working for the city and county of Denver and doing more public meetings than anybody in the history of the Public Works Department, this is so ridiculous. I can't believe the gentleman even made that statement. And I talked to one of their people afterwards and said, when does something go to the federal government that has not been seen by the citizens of Denver and solicited input from the citizens of Denver? And he had no answer. I didn't go to the gentleman who was supposedly the project director, because there was no sense going there, because his inability to answer questions last night was quite obvious. The one woman who was running the program was saying, oh, they're not ready to release yet because they don't have all the data. As I pointed out to him when I got my chance to ask my questions, I said, I know the project manager for Parsons. I've known him for over 30 years. And at the August meeting, he had told me the traffic study was submitted to the city, but they can't talk about it till the city goes public. That was 8 months ago, folks. There is no excuse, and I mentioned that last night, for this report not to have been disseminated, okay? And that's one of the reasons I'm trying to argue against a lot of the stuff, besides the erroneous information they keep putting out, okay? If you've seen their 2016, 2018 studies, and if you followed any of their information on the website, you will find out that their forecasts for ridership continually change, not only the total numbers, but what year they intend to reach these numbers, okay? In 2016, ridership was going to go from 22,000 on Colfax under the 15L and 15 to 41,000 in 2040. Then in the 2018, which was actually the final of the draft from 2016, it was 43,000, but in 2035. Well, last Christmas on their website, they put out, oh, guess what, folks? The ridership's going to increase by 30% to 7,600. Which is a 70 or 80% reduction from what they put out in the reports that they utilize to move forward on this project in the first place, okay? And I had reviewed the study early on, and I told them, I even wrote to them and said, one of the worst studies I've ever read in my 50 years in the transportation business, because there's little or no data or backup in their studies. It's all subjective, if you've read those reports, and they had their green, yellow, red things on good, fair, poor, but there was no backup in terms of how did they pick that. And they went out of their way to discredit rail at every time they did anything. And they keep putting out now that, oh, the citizens voted for bus rapid transit. The citizens have never seen the term bus rapid transit offered to them. Okay, when they put out these things and got votes, it was always, would you like to see rapid transit on Colfax. Okay. Now, in my limited 50 years of having to deal with this, I can tell you, if we went out on the street tomorrow and walked up to people and said, what do you call rapid transit? The vast majority of people are going to say rail. Buses will never come to mind relative to rapid transit. Okay. Now, the question is, why is there this big push, though, for bus rapid transit? Because it's happening around the country, and FTA is promoting this. The reason is the federal government has given up financing rail systems. They're too expensive. Okay. You remember we did T-Rex just one quarter, and that was $1.76 billion. Okay. They look at a project like Denver, 300. They can do 5 bus rapid transit systems for 1 rail line. So the federal government has said, let's disperse this and do it. So suddenly, quote, bus rapid transit has become the name item of what they're all trying to pursue. And it's all based totally on a cost issue. Okay. Now, the other thing that they modified in December was the cost of the project. In their original studies, we can do this for 150 million. Suddenly it's 250 to 300 million. But again, nothing that says, why did the cost go up? Now, they have stated they now have an intergovernmental agreement with Aurora. I walked out of the August meeting with the Aurora planner out to the parking lot, discussed with them. Aurora has said from day one, number one, they're running in the outside lanes, which was repeated last night. And Aurora has said, we're not putting 1 dime towards this. RTD is not putting 1 dime towards this. This is all being funded by the city and county of Denver and the federal government if they get the money. And last night they announced they have a strong chance of getting $126 million out of the infrastructure package that the Biden administration put through. Now, again, even with that and the money that they still have left over, they're only around 150 million. So if they're going to build a $300 million project, they're either have to implement this in a staggered fashion, pieces at a time, or they got to come up with another 150 million. Now, one of the other reasons they're pushing this, which you may be aware of, is we get a new mayor in 90 days. Okay. And both of the new candidates have said this is a project they want to take a closer look at, because I'm sure they've heard from other people and seen things about what's going on. Okay. One of the other issues I want to point out to you before I get to what I consider my real key piece on this thing is the parking study that they put out. In August, they had a gentleman get up and say, oh, it's only going to be 100 parking spaces taken out, and the side streets can handle that overflow. Again, in December, they changed their website and said now it's 300 parking spaces. Well, there's only 946 or whatever parking spaces on Colfax. So they're literally taking out a third. I'll bet they haven't said a word to any of the businesses about the potential impact, because the businesses rely on the automobile for their businesses along Colfax. They are not getting it from transit. Okay. So that's another critical change that they made. To go back to the diversion item that I mentioned in the very beginning, can't get anything from them on this. So I use my traffic engineering background, what capacity can be handled on a 2-lane roadway, which is what Colfax is going to be. And I get, maybe in case some of you aren't familiar with it, what they're intending to do is take away the center of the roadway for buses only. So you're only going to end up with 1 moving lane in each direction and parking on each side for the businesses, which is going to make it a very congested, difficult trip to stay on Colfax. Typically, we use 16,000 cars per day on a 2-lane roadway. Streets like Quebec, which are consistently overloaded, where you might be able to get 20 to 24,000 jammed in. But if you've been on Quebec in those 2-lane sections, you've seen the queuing that has occurred. And they've had to lengthen the signal cycle to 2 minutes in order to try and get traffic through that corridor. Anyway, I estimated that 22,000 cars will be diverted off of Colfax from the 35,000 that they said pre-pandemic. That's at Colorado Boulevard, because Colorado Boulevard is literally the choke point in the corridor for all the streets. So 11,000 added on to those streets. The one-way streets, you're talking 11,000 each pretty much, because you got to go one direction and back the other. So, but anyway, it's shared by the quarter. But even so, in the peak hours, that's a significant add-on. The only information they've given relative to diversion is that your commute time on 13-478 would increase from 1 minute to 7 minutes, and on Colfax from 6 minutes to 9 minutes. I would have to dispute that. And again, the 1 minute would be if you're trying to get from downtown into Capitol Hill. The 7 minutes would be if you're trying to get all the way to east to Montclair or East Colfax neighborhood, something along that line. So I just want to be clear to you how and why I generated and put out the information that I did. Now, the key point, which was also brought up at last night's meeting, which of course they toss out, is that I can have bus rapid transit on Colfax for you if you want it in the next year for less money than they've already obligated to their consultant. All you have to do is put it in the outside lanes like Aurora has. You do what Aurora did. You do built bulb outs at each of the 24 stations that they have, 12 in each direction. That's curb and gutter work. You might have to put some inlets in for drainage, since you can't necessarily always run the water around the bulb outs. I've done dozens of those in Denver over the years, so I know what that takes. But that's flat work. Anybody who's done concrete knows this is not expensive construction work, okay? Even if you move the new shelters that RTD put in, that's a few $1,000s to resituate the shelter up into the bulb out so that you would have an open path behind for pedestrians on the sidewalk, separate from where the transit riders would be. I also anticipated when I estimated this that I would do a 200-foot long bus stop when most of the buses are only 85 feet. So I've overestimated everything. I also estimated they would have to put new controllers in at every signal, although I don't know if that's really necessary or not. Then you have to put the detectors on the mast arms to pick up the indicator or emitter from the bus. They also have to go in the buses. That triggers the preemption. And then you have to do sign-in and striping. All the stuff I've just told you is in the thousands of dollars. So you add that all up, it then adds up to millions when you're looking at doing the entire corridor. But still, I'm saying, and I can do it for $20 million and probably less, and they have $20 million in the bank sitting there because they had $70 million in their bond issue for doing all this. They argue it's safer, and that studies show that it's safer to have it in the center of the street. Again, I put my 50 years of traffic engineering and transportation on the line saying, I don't know where they're coming up with this. I read a study by 2 Chinese engineers who came out and said, outside running bus lanes are more efficient and safer, okay? Because again, you're crossing people at the signals, what they're used to and being on the outside. You put it in the center. If you've ever been down to Colorado and Colfax, watch what goes on there. People see a bus, it's a transfer point. They don't want to miss the bus. They literally will dash through the moving traffic on Colorado Boulevard and across Colfax in order to catch their bus. Same thing's going to happen here. Even though those buses will be at higher frequency, you will see people see a bus. They will dash out through the parked cars, through the moving lane to get out there to catch the bus. I've complained about all the way back to when Mary Beth Sussman was the councilwoman, and this all came up. And I said, you'll make this the #1 fatality corridor in the city. So I'm just laying out to you the facts as I know them. Okay, you can come to your conclusions as to what you think is right, what you think is wrong. But my basic feeling is, if you're so concerned about providing improved transit to the city, why aren't we getting it out there as fast as possible? Why are we waiting on a $300 million total reconstruction of the street, which they're saying now will make it by 2027? Okay, so we got to wait another 4 years plus or whatever. And of course, most projects in the city never run on schedule. So you can anticipate it might be 2028. Whereas I can have it there, if not later this year, early next year. And we can test whether or not bus rapid transit will actually work and generate the increase in ridership that they claim. I'm going to make one additional point here. There's 2 reasons why And it's being promoted by the Hancock administration right out of the mayor's office, why they want to do this. Okay. Number one is ego. You build something like that in the center of the street, they all get to take their pictures, put it on the internet, share it with the world. They've done that with Cleveland. They've done that with Albuquerque or where, and that's what they want to do here. And then the other one is, and the worst part of it, political. If you spend $300 million reconstructing the street, I guarantee you, there's no politician in our lifetime, your children's lifetime, maybe your grandchildren's lifetime that will go out and rip out a $300 million project, even if it's an abject failure. So the bottom line is, if this project goes ahead and they're running it as fast as they can, trying to shove it through, you're going to be stuck with it no matter what. And I got to be quite honest with you. I think they've misled the businesses and they've intentionally avoided the neighborhoods. That's my position, and you are welcome to question it.
If you raise your hand, and thank you, Dennis, for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Dennis? Miles?
Hey, Dennis, nice to meet you at the public meeting last night.
Yes, it was.
I think it's important for everyone to know, again, they're planning on spending $300 million, and it'll be federal, state, and city money. And they actually have shaved a year off. They're going from the plans they have now into final construction documents, and they want to start construction in a year and a half. And I think, as Dennis mentioned, I've been asking for since last year when they started the traffic study, well, tell us what's going to happen on 14th. Tell us what's going to happen on the side streets. And they never would. And tell us what your traffic calculations are based on. They never would. And they hired a traffic consultant, and that study is completed, as far as I know. And so when they just showed us the plans last night, basically what you have to understand is the 2 center lanes of Colfax will basically be exclusively for buses. So you will not be able to cross that road like you do now. It will basically become a barrier. They will only be allowing traffic to cross that at a few places. So one example is, so if you were heading west, you may only have 3 places to make a left turn. And one of those places is going to be at Bluebird. It'll be at Adams. So all of the traffic that's trying to get into the neighborhood will be focused onto Adams. And so I was trying to pose questions of, you need to tell us what's going to happen here, because if people are trying to turn left and there's a concert and that backs up, and now the single lane of Colfax is blocked and all the cars are now backed up on Adams trying to make a left turn on 14th, will you put a light in at 14th? Will you have to mitigate some of this stuff? And Adams is a very narrow street. Are you going to talk to the neighbors about your plans? Are you going to talk to them about all the calculations? And they basically said it at the stakeholder meeting last week, and the meeting this week is, we aren't allowed to talk about the traffic report. The FTA needs to approve it before we can talk about it. But we want to start construction in a year and a half. And for them to be spending $300 million, it's like the third of the cost of the I-70 project. How can you not talk to the neighbors or talk about traffic? Because if you don't talk about traffic, it's a transportation project. You really don't have a plan. We need to understand what the calculations are and what the impacts are. And I even asked them about outreach. You're spending a lot of money. What's the outreach to the community? What is your plan? You've been doing this for 15 years. What's your plan? Oh, they said nothing. So we're basically they cut a year off the planning. They plan to break ground in a year and a half. And I think we're at the point of, for us to get questions answered, we're going to have to start talking to Diane DeGette, the governor, our senators, because they just are not stopping and they're not listening. And it's just, it's unbelievable they would move with a project of this scale without even talking or letting people understand what the issues are going to be with the transportation. I told them, I don't think a lot of people even know about this project. But again, they would not say what they were going to do, how they were going to engage, or any of that. It's basically, we have the money and we're running. So this is a big problem. And I think we're going to have to get together and really start petitioning our representatives about this.
Thank you, Miles. Judith had a question, and Patricia, you're right after Judith.
I would only, before Judith starts, I would only comment that what Miles said is absolutely true. The reason they're delaying is they know the reaction they're going to get from the neighborhoods all along this corridor when that traffic study finally comes out. Okay. So that's what they're trying to avoid. Their goal is if they can push it far enough down the road, we can't stop it no matter what yelling and screaming we do. Okay, Judith?
Well, actually, that my question has to do with that, and Miles addressed it briefly, but Dennis, there is, as you acknowledged, there's a new mayor coming in at the end of the summer. Is there a way that we as a neighborhood can put pressure on this new mayor to let him or her know that we want this project reevaluated?
Well, again, not being a political expert, I can't sit here and specifically say to you, yeah, there's a way to do it. But I would say, as a result of this last meeting, and as you know, since we talked, I've been going to every neighborhood group trying to get the business organizations to lay this all out. My thing would be to have all the neighborhood organizations, to the extent possible, if they can send letters or whatever communication there is through the campaign offices or whatever for the two mayoral candidates. You might also want to try the city council candidates. As you know, Candy Cedabaca was there last night. She and I had a nice talk afterwards. She's not a big fan of this. She's listening to the neighborhoods. Chris Herndon is out, but he was bought and paid for on this project from day one. So you're going to have to find out and deal with whoever is out in District 8 as well. And you have Amanda Sawyer, and I have spent time talking to Amanda. Amanda agrees with me. She knows we can put it out there in the outside lanes, but she says they're ramming it through. They don't listen to city council. They're not listening. So all I can say is any potential, contact the campaign offices of Kelly Bruff and Mike Johnston, find out if they're taking information from neighborhood organizations and raise this as the official neighborhood organizations. And I'm trying, like I say, I will notify, but I would like you guys, well as another neighborhood organization, to reach out to some of the other ones and said, hey, if you guys are not totally in favor of this, or you think this needs more involvement by the neighborhoods, we need to be talking to these people. We got to get the word out to that. There, you can also be making comments to the media, 4, 7, 9, 13, you know, all of them. And in particular, I would suggest Next on Channel 9, which is sponsored by or handled by Kyle Clark. But Marshall Zellinger and Steve Sadek are very, very good at following through with concerns that come from the neighborhoods. Tony Kovalevsky on Channel 7 is the only announced investigative reporter that I'm aware of still in the Denver system. I would send something to him as well. And then there's all of the different newspapers that are online, the Gazette, Denver Right, Westward, and the rest of them. Again, if they hear from the organization, oh, I forgot the big one, INC. I tried working with Drew Dutcher. He has now left as the president of INC. He's going into the Peace Corps and going to Africa. And they shut down waiting for their new election. I wanted INC to do like we did on I-70, hold a Saturday presentation at a school or whatever with an auditorium that would hold hundreds of people, where we could get up and present stuff, have the city there and do the questions or where like that. And really get things going, much like we were able to do on the East Denver study when we were at Johnson and Wales. And they kept talking about their outstanding outreach. Well, we got 500 people at that meeting. We did the outstanding outreach, and they literally booed the planners on a number of things they presented. I wasn't in the auditorium. I was actually out in the hallway explaining bus rapid transit to Kyle Clark from Channel 9 and other people. So you have to take advantage of those type of issues and ways to get hold of us. And as Miles said, there's nothing wrong with getting hold of John Hickenlooper and Michael Bennett. I know both of them. I worked with them in the city when they were there. I saw Michael last year at Dennis Gallagher's funeral. So all I can say, any way that you can reach out to an elected official who might in some way have some influence on not only the project, but on the funding. And that's why I mentioned the two senators. I say, again, coming from an official organization with a letterhead that's got you're there, and if you can get numerous ones and INC to jump on board, that carries weight in terms of them seeing there is some opposition or concern. Let's put it concern, not opposition, of what's being done in the city.
Thanks. I wanted to just mention, because you said something about city council and acknowledge that candidate Shannon Hoffman is attending our meeting today. And nice to see you, Shannon, and thank you for coming.
Patricia, go ahead.
Don't be surprised. I don't look like Patricia.
No, you don't, but you can go ahead.
This is Dennis Moynihan. My wife is Trish Schock, and I'm using her laptop. She's here as well. I don't have the same resume as the other Dennis on the call, but I think we both share deep respect for Dennis Gallagher, who you just mentioned. So all of us Dennis's care. We live at 13th and 14th and on Adams. So this has been a concern of ours, which the concern that Miles brought up about the restrictions on traffic exiting Colfax in this scenario of the bus rapid transit, so that our street Adams is essentially going to become a sacrifice zone. We're happy to bear our share of the burden for any kind of increased use of non-car transport, but really is maddening to think that select streets are going to have massive amounts of traffic rammed down them, like our street, Adams. A little over 10 years ago, I launched and led the campaign to block the Walmart at 9th and Colorado. I know Senator Bennett. I don't know if he was a senator at the time. I can't remember. But anyway, he was definitely, yeah, he was. He said, like, everyone from Hancock on down said this was a done deal and you can't stop it. From Capitol Hill, Congress Park, Mayfair, we organized and we blocked it. And I think we need to, like Dennis said, have not only a media strategy. I think the incoming mayors, certainly one of them, will be responsive to public protest. Johnston, I think, is probably potentially going to be, he's hoping to use the mayorship as a stepping stone, and he'll be a little more responsive rather than Brough, who's in the pocket of the business community. So anyway, I do think, we live very close to 14th Avenue, where it has 3 lanes. Cars regularly go 50 miles an hour. I'm woken up once a month by the sound of a screeching tires and a crash, because there's constant accidents on 14th. I think whatever the plan for BRT on Colfax, it has to address the lack of traffic enforcement and the lack of traffic calming. And with our neighbors, we're fairly well organized on our block. And I'm trying to persuade people, we may just put traffic calming in ourselves. I'll just get a jackhammer and do it. I'm really getting sick of the people speeding down this street. And I hope The other question I have for Dennis or anyone else on the call, as Hancock exits, and there's huge sums of money that you mentioned earlier, what funds have they committed to date? What is the potential for mischief for them to contractually obligate further public funds? And is there something like a restraining order, lawsuit, some kind of injunctive action that can be taken to prevent Hancock on the way out the door from committing tens of millions of dollars to something? Thanks.
Well, to answer it, Dennis, I don't know how much more Hancock can do. They do have $70 million, but they obligated $29 million to Parsons to do the design. And I understand they asked for $17 million to hire a project manager to run this project, which amazes me because we did everything in-house when we were there. So why you need an outside manager at $17 million? I have no idea, but that's 46 million out of their 70. So they can't move the money in the bond issue without going to city council. Okay. If it's earmarked for a certain use, they got to do it. I'll go back to the previous bond issue a while back when they had so much money earmarked for the upgrade of Betcher Arena or Betcher Theater, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, they did not come up with the matching funds. They had to go back to city council to transfer that money, and they transferred it on to 6 other arts projects or whatever like that. So that's the process. So I don't think Hancock, well, you can't use bond money. Okay. Now, if he wants to somehow obligate budget money, he might be able to do it. But again, a huge shift like that has got to go through city council, and with city council all up for re-election or whatever, and they have line item veto power now from the changes that were made. I don't see them able to make that kind of shift right now. Okay. They've got it going the way they want it for Hancock's legacy to do this. And I think they think it's far enough down the road, as you mentioned, that it can't be stopped. I'm one of these optimists who says, I don't believe that. I really believe if there's enough organized, and I put this organized opposition, you can create a political awareness that some politicians will listen. And all we really want them to do now, as I talked to Miles last night, is go, time out. Let's put this on hold and take a further look at it and see. And that opens up the entire ability for the new mayor. And the first thing he's got to do is he's got to do appointees. So, they're not going to get a lot done in the first 6 months. But if they can bring this project to a halt until they get their people in place and want to look at it with the new city council on board as well, that buys us enough time to really get something going. But yes, we need to be doing something now.
Let me chime in.
Hold on, Miles. We have 3 people standing in line asking questions. So
can I follow up with what he just said, because this is about funding and
Miles, please, let's give a couple other people a chance to ask a question. Charlotte, go ahead.
Hello. I can't compete with all of the credentials, but I am all but the dissertation in urban planning. So just FYI. I've been trying to envision what this would look like and how that it would feel and operate as I've understood the plans. And I think the word that continuously comes to mind is that it is so divisive. And I mean physically, literally divisive, because 13th and 14th will become ever more crowded. It will be very hard to get across. And I walk from Congress Park up to, say, City Park, or I can get up to Sprouts, those kinds of things, go up to Starbucks. It doesn't matter. The point is that it almost would cut us off from easy access to the other side of Colfax, because taking out those lanes, the existing traffic will get diverted to 13th and 14th. And what stays on Colfax will be ever more busy, backed up. Now I'm walking, right? It'd be the same thing if anyone were trying to ride a bicycle, you know. There'd be very few places to get across safely, as I understand. So the whole thing becomes an obstacle course, dividing us on one side and having a difficult time accessing things to the north because of these taking these 2 lanes out of the middle for the buses doesn't make any sense to me. And that's all I could say. I have been lazy in opposing this because I thought it was so stupid. That's, as I thought about the practicalities for myself and for the city. So I would like to see if we as Congress Park neighbors can start to take a position. And that's just a question for all of us to actually do something. And the timeout is the first step to say, wait, we need more data. And I do see a pattern that oftentimes we are not involved. There's tokenism of after the fact. It's always after it's too late, they think, right? So I would like to suggest that to the rest of us who may have been watching and hoping that this nightmare would end. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Sarah, go ahead with your remarks.
Yeah, thanks. I guess just a general question, which I think the conversation has kind of answered, but it sounds like there isn't necessarily an organized opposition effort, like a funded opposition effort. And it sounds like that could be of use. So I don't know, Dennis, if you've heard of anything or if there's a place where people could go to get more information, you know, that isn't just the city, but is something else, kind of providing people with consolidated information.
Well, Sarah, that's part of the reason why I wrote this, part of the reason I've been going to neighborhood groups. I hate to say I'm single-handed. I'm not. Jeannie Lee is also, we've worked together in the East Denver plan. She's outreached to neighborhood organizations. She got me hooked up with Mayfair. That's why I'm doing this, is to try and get the word out, to try to get an organized response. Again, as I said earlier, organized opposition by official neighborhood groups, not individuals. There's no way I single-handedly could possibly affect this. But if you can get INC on board, if the individual neighbors in the corridor, and in particularly the business organizations, if they realize what this might do to them, now there's a chance with all these tied together to getting the politicians to say, whoops, maybe this needs to slow down. Maybe we need to take a closer look. And that's really all we're trying to get them to do. Otherwise, yes, this is a done deal.
Thank you, Tom. Let me say one thing. We're at the end of our meeting. Tom will be our last question. Then I'll make a quick announcement. Tom?
Thank you, Vicki. I think I would like to see some kind of clarification or explanation on how Colfax, when it's down to 2 lanes, is going to accommodate emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, police cars. My second point is right now, I believe we have 7 or 8 bus stops at Congress Park along Colfax. This proposal from BRT narrows that down to 4. And Dennis, I was wondering on your proposed scenario, are you proposing 4 stops or 7?
I didn't catch the last part, but as far as emergency vehicles, they will run in the bus lane. Okay, they will simply have to worry about when they get to the station areas or if the buses are in the way. But yes, it's going to make it more congested for them. So to me, if I was the traffic engineer, I would be putting preemption on 13th, 14th, 17th, and 18th, particularly since you have a fire station sitting right there at Harrison and 13th, 14th, or whatever, that might be their primary run as opposed. Again, this is an issue they haven't mentioned, they didn't discuss. If I can go back to what Dennis and Miles said earlier, like on Adams Street or where, I might point out the reason all the mid blocks on the one ways are mid blocks because the city decided they didn't want to put them at individual intersections, knowing it would concentrate the traffic on those streets. So they wanted a mid block so every street was treated equal and they weren't damaging anybody in any neighborhoods. Again, the issue of what will happen at individual intersections has not been addressed. Now, they did announce something last night, which was brand new, which is they're going to put in 5 of what they call these hawk signals, which you may have seen. They're the ones that are up there that if you push the button, the light comes on then and stops everybody so pedestrians can get across. But I have no idea where those 5 are and whether they're only in Denver or whether they go all the way out through Aurora as well. Again, lack of detail is what's killing us on this whole thing.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone. Clearly, we have much further to discuss as a neighborhood. And Dennis, thank you for bringing up BRT, because I think universally as a board, we've discussed it for a long time, but the lack of information in the neighborhood has been hard. People just are not as aware as it's important for it to be. So
Well, I want to thank you for having me. I really appreciate that. And for all of you who got on board. And I want it very clear, if you mention my name and people say to you, oh, he's anti-transit, make it very clear. I'm not anti-transit. I'm totally pro-transit. And that's why I offered what I considered a cheaper, better, faster alternative. Thank you very much for having me. Have a good evening.
thank you. So a couple of things. Obviously, this issue will come back again and be discussed. Our next meeting is June 21st, and we will continue to try and keep you posted about progress on the Congress Park construction project. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a really good evening. Good night.